Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Good Enough Mom Club, Tools for Thriving, Not Just Surviving. I know I can use this today.
Oh,
So
me too.
really,
Me too. Me
really
too.
looking
I
forward to
have
this
I've
conversation.
just been surviving for the last 2 weeks, so I definitely want to thrive.
Yeah, this is the longest month ever as well. Um, okay, well, while we let people trickle in, one thing we love to do, if you wouldn't mind, just throwing in the chat. Make sure it's turned on to chat with everyone. Throw in where you're joining us from. It's always fun to see people come in from far
Ooh.
and wide, and we're a community here online.
Oh
I'm
my
in Ann
God,
Arbor,
so many
Michigan.
different places. This is so cool.
Yeah,
Um, I am currently in Santa Barbara, California.
great. So cool. Yeah, we've got New Jersey, Brooklyn, ooh, Quebec, Rhode Island, Philly,
Oh, I love seeing these
Chicago. So many fun
everywhere.
spots.
That's cool.
Very cool. And one more note too, if you could, when you're writing in the chat, just make sure it's turned on to everyone versus host and panelists. That way everyone can see, any chats you may have or questions. We're going to give people a couple more minutes to trickle in here before we officially kick things off. Um, but while we're
Oh my God,
waiting,
it's all over. I'm so excited to see all of this. This
yes,
is
it's
great.
all over. I'm also going to launch a quick poll. We're always curious how old your little one is.
Oh my God, I'm gonna fill this out. Oh, I can't.
Okay, and while that's going, let me just introduce myself and introduce my amazing guest as well. So I'm Ariane Anusbigian. I lead brand marketing at Lalo, and I'm joined by our amazing guest today, Dr. Sarah Oreck. She is a Columbia University trained MD, MS, reproductive psychiatrist, and mom of three, perhaps the most important title. She's also the co-founder of Mavida Health. Mavida Health is a health and wellness company that focuses on providing resources, support, and care for women, particularly during and after pregnancy. Its mission often revolves around maternal health, mental health, and empowering women to thrive through different stages of life. So, Sarah, thank you so much for being here today for our topic, which again is Good Enough Mom Club, Tools for
Yes.
Thriving, Not Just Surviving. And I think I missed too, I'm also the mom of two little ones. Sarah and I both have a 9-month-old
Yes.
baby girl and older boys. So, yeah, I think we all are looking forward to this conversation.
Yes.
All right. And just to kind of give a sense for who's here today, we've got a lot of folks with that 6 to 18 month range. Well, really 0 to 6 to 18 months.
Yes.
And runs the gamut all the way up 4 years
Very cool.
plus. So we're in good company, and let's kick things off, shall we?
Fantastic.
Okay. One more admin thing too. I'm so sorry I forgot. If you have any questions, we're going to get to Q&A at the end. Please throw your questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of the webinar. If you throw them in the chat, I could miss them because I'm doing a lot of things at once. So do me a favor, throw them in the Q&A section, and I'll be pulling questions from there that we'll have Sarah answer at the end. And then last thing is we are doing an in-webinar giveaway. So stick around until the end of the
Woo!
giveaway. Yes, we are doing a $100 Lalo gift card. And then Mavida is also giving away 1 year free membership to their Mavida Health app. So thank you again for that, Sarah.
Yes. Yeah, we're excited.
Okay, so Good Enough Mom Club. We're all in this club. We're going to be talking about things like mom guilt, the mental load, tools for coping, all of those
Yeah.
things. Today is actually Maternal Health Awareness Day. So we're really excited to be able to celebrate and support moms everywhere with this topic.
Yes.
All right. So first off, Sarah, I feel like mom guilt is this like buzzword that has become really popular. It's this term that like I feel like I see all over my social media. My friends and I are
Yes.
talking about. It's very buzzy, but it's also very real. Can
100%.
you like talk about like first define for us what mom guilt is, where it came from? Let's maybe start there.
Yeah, this is interesting. I don't know the exact origins of it, but I
Yeah.
certainly know what it feels like personally and professionally. So when we think about mom guilt, it's really anxiety that many mothers in particular feel, but also parents generally. It just seems to happen to fall more on mothers. And it's really about feeling like you're falling short of your expectations, mostly that you put on yourself, but in some ways, what society puts on all of us. And a lot of what mom guilt involves is self criticism because it's really hard to balance all of the demands that we have.
Mhm.
This has been coming up on social media, which is really exciting to see. And like for people to clue in more to that, we are spending more time with our children than even our parents' generation. When many of our parents or mothers were maybe stay at home, and yet a lot of our kind of peers are working mothers, and yet they are spending more time with their children than ever before. So we're almost doing twice the amount of work, right? And
Yeah.
so I think it's this idea of wanting to be perfect, of thinking of different ideals, maybe from our parents, but also some of the things that we see reflected on social media and feeling like, oh, I'm not in Europe gallivanting with all of my children and making it look perfect. Oh man, what am I doing? I'm not giving my kids the right, whether it's the right lunches, the right experiences. And that's really, really hard. And so it's important to recognize so much that what we see reflected in social media is a highlight reel and that
Mhm.
there are, so many ways to be a mother, but I wish we could get rid of mom guilt. But I think it's a really difficult thing that we have to come together as a community. Because I know we're doing everything we can. We're good enough.
Right. Right. Um, I love what you said there because, Lalo was actually really founded around this idea, that there is no one way to parent. And like you said, I do
Yes.
think that we see all the time on social media. I mean, I know my algorithm is just like mom stuff back to back. And it does make you think, even in your best kind of mindset, like, oh, these are all the things I'm not doing. And you compare yourself to these people, like this highlight reel, or, you're not doing this parenting style, or, oh, I feel really bad. I like snapped at my kid the other day. I should have done
Yes.
this. Um,
Yes. I
yeah,
know the gentle parenting is sometimes really
ugh,
hard because you see, like,
it
this is how
is.
you should talk to your kids. And I'm like,
Yeah, but
stop
like,
telling your
but
kids,
how
right?
when
But I'm
I'm
like,
juggling all
honey,
of the
right,
things?
right. Honey, I see you're spilling this juice. Tell me what's happening. So I do think someone just put in, which is really nice, that that's why I take a break from all social media platforms, because again, I think we're getting some really interesting tips and tools, but it's also hard to not feel critical of
Yeah.
yourself when you see these tips and tools. And so I think it's really trying to open up and be like, we're not all perfect. And this is why I love this concept of good enough parenting, which we'll get into, because the point is that you shouldn't be perfect because kids need imperfections to build resilience. And
Right.
so I can get into this now. So, good enough parenting or a good enough mothering was something that was invented actually in like the 60s by a psychoanalyst called Donald Winnicott, who is actually a pediatrician and a psychoanalyst. They used to do that in the last century. And what it basically means is that you don't have to be the most attentive or attuned mother, right? That's the mom that like doesn't let their baby cry because she knows you got to have milk or it's time to go to sleep. You want your baby, right? And this is very clear. This is not neglect. We don't mean neglect or abuse. We mean you want baby to cry a little bit and kind of like need to in some ways struggle a little bit before you give them what they need because that builds resilience and strength. And if your toddlers, for example, get everything they want exactly when they want it, guess what? The outside world is not like that. Outside
Mhm.
world does not revolve around one individual child. They are going to be disappointed. They are going to have people disappoint them, things that they don't get. And so, in some ways, kind of not being the perfect parent, the helicopter parent, and having a little distance. And yes, you're going to cry and you're going to be a little disappointed because I can't get you this car that you want at the toy store, actually builds resilience, which is reflected in what your real life experience is in the outside world.
Totally. I love that. Can I acknowledge something too? Because this is so I have a 4-year-old who's going to be 5 next month. I know you have a similar aged,
Yes.
older kiddo. And I love what you said about, imperfection builds resilience. It also takes effort to be quote unquote, I guess, imperfect and not give your kid everything that they may want, right? So, like, an example that I can think of from this past weekend is I had to go to Target for diapers, right? And I had to bring my older kiddo with me. And of course, it's like, we're walking through the aisles to get diapers and he, sees a Lego that he wants. Well, I don't want to buy him that Lego. It was just Christmas, his birthday's coming up, and I feel like it's also my, duty to be like, no, every time we go out does not mean we're
You
going
don't
to
know.
get a gift for you. The it honestly would have been so much easier had I just bought that Lego for
Yeah.
him versus deal with the consequences that came from not buying it.
Yes.
And I feel like that's its own kind of like additional effort, and we'll get into like mental load, but like
Yes.
an additional load to take on, and then an additional guilt where you're like, they're kicking and screaming and they're upset with
Uh-huh.
you, and you have to keep
And people
reminding
are
yourself.
looking at you. This is before
Yes,
I had kids, I'd be like that person that was like, oh, you shouldn't be out with your kids if they're kicking and screaming like that. And now, like, that's me. But I
right.
think this is so interesting because I'm kind of having the opposite experience
Okay.
where I'm displaced from my home. I lived in the Palisades
Yeah.
and I am having a hard time myself. And so when we've gone to a store, I have just given in because I
Yeah, of
didn't have
course.
the space or the kind of bandwidth to deal with the tantrum or getting them through that. So I said, fine, we're at CVS. You're just going to buy whatever toy you want, just pick one. But I think what you're getting at is we have to check in with ourselves. It sounds
Yes.
like you were able or had the bandwidth to tolerate that, which in some ways does teach your child something important. Getting a
Right.
toy every time, right? And we need to cherish the things that we have and have gratitude for that and not always be into a new kind of shiny new object. But I think what's important is taking your own temperature and saying, can I deal with this or not today? And for me
Yeah.
recently, it's been, I can't. And so you're either
Right.
not going to go to the store with me so you don't see anything, or I'm just going to give in. But in other times, I would have the bandwidth to say, okay, this is going to be difficult, but I'm going to have the tools to be able to contain your emotions because I'm able to contain my own. And I can kind of deal with the people that are going to look at us and the gentle parenting that I'm going to do around, I know
Right.
you want this, but you have Legos at home, etc.
Right. And so I think what I'm hearing you say too is that, you are good enough either way. If you have bandwidth at that moment in time, great. If you don't have bandwidth, that's okay too.
And
And
you
kind
got
of,
to get them the chocolate chip cookie. Like that's
yeah,
okay.
that's okay. That's okay. Okay. Well, thank you. I think I needed that reassurance today. So I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
but I think it's like having that flexibility where I know like sure, like giving in to the one day that my kids want a cookie or a candy or something, it's going to be fine. And that's what I needed on that day, and maybe another day we'll figure out something else. But I think this is all about right not being perfect because I think there is this thing of like, well, I need to say no to this or they can't eat that candy when they're not supposed to. And again, it's about they're going to be okay either way.
Right. This brings something else up for me too, which is I find that for myself and often for my friends, as a mom, I can often feel like the less fun parent. And I think this sort of ties into our next topic too, which is like the mental load, because I am keeping track of all of these things that like maybe we said yes to, or we said no to, or classes I want to get my kid enrolled in, or, new clothes that they need because they're growing out of whatever. Can we talk a little bit about that? Like both the guilt around maybe not being the more fun one because you are managing this whole mental load, and then also get into the mental load.
Mental load. Well, let's start
Yeah.
with what the mental load is. I think it's something that we're starting
Please.
to talk a lot about, which is so
Yeah.
exciting, but it really reflects this invisible burden that, in a lot of, I would say, cisgender heterosexual relationships falls on the mother. And it involves things that aren't visible. It's the ordering the diapers, making sure that there's formula stocked, ordering everything from Lalo to make sure you have the right things for your kid at the appropriate ages. It's the scheduling, the doctor's appointments, all those things. And even though they're invisible because they're things that are happening on the phone or over email, they take up a lot of space. And
Mhm.
your brain space is already, some of it's dedicated obviously to yourself, but a lot of it is started to dedicate on your children. So now you have this, and then you have all of these other tasks. And I think what's hard is that unlike a physical task, like, cleaning the floor right here, these don't have an ending. They sort of
Right.
are open-ended because like, the doctor's appointments will be in perpetuity, their future school enrollment, whatever, the clothing that they grow out of. And so I think this is really, really hard. And it can just bleed into so many other issues. I forgot what your other question was. Unending laundry and house cleaning. Love that. Yes.
Yeah.
I love the comments we're seeing.
I know, same. Reminder too, as we're gathering questions, please continue to throw questions for Sarah into the Q&A, because we'll get to those at the end, and she is such a
But
wealth.
what was your other question about the mental load? Because I
I
started
think it was
describing it and
kind
then
of
I
coming from this
lost the thing.
place of like
Oh, the fun parent.
guilt. Yeah, guilt plus mental load, where like I feel like I'm not able to be as fun because I am handling the mental load. And then I also feel guilty about that.
Yeah. No, no, I think that's hard. And yeah, someone said moms are never the fun parent.
I
And
know.
there's some biological kind of things that underpin that in some ways when you're a primary caretaker, if that's the role that you're taking. Women tend to be, and again, this is not the case for everyone. I'm making some like generalizations, tend to be more risk averse. And this is where we see even with babies, right? Mom is like very protective, but dad is like, oh, that throwing baby up in the air, and that's like this really novel thing. Again, this is not always the case for different parents,
Right,
and
of
different
course.
women have different risk tolerance, but in some ways that goes together. And I think it's a real decision of like, well, do I want to have a conversation with my partner to offload some of my mental load so I can be a little bit more free, so I can have more fun, so I can do that. And again, it's all about like, what is it that you value? And and I think if we make more value aligned decisions, we can feel better. Let that guilt kind of like, stay somewhere else. Because ultimately, we can't do everything. We can't be every type of parent.
Mhm.
And figuring out, what's right for me, what role do I feel like is good enough, I
Right.
think is also really important. You may also become a really fun parent, maybe when your kids are older and
Mhm.
you're not changing their diapers, and when you're not dealing, like, maybe when they're adolescents, that's something where you're going to kind of be more fun. But I think it's a really challenging state, and I sometimes fall into that where I don't feel like I'm that fun either, or that there's maybe some other people that have more space or bandwidth to do that with their kids.
Totally. Yeah, I love what you said about, there's different phases too, right? Of life,
Yes,
and phases and stages. And, right now with a baby and an almost 5-year-old and working, and it's hard to be fun when you're breastfeeding or pumping and
I
you
know.
doing all the things. So,
And so again, a lot of this is like, you don't have to be the whole package or the whole thing at this
right.
stage. but like there are times, and I think this is something that's said a lot. We can't have it all at the same time, but we can have it at different phases, right? Like if right now you have babies and toddlers, maybe your career isn't getting 100% of the care that maybe you wanted it to at some other point in your life. But maybe in a couple years when your kids are in school, that may change. Or I always see like for the Taylor Swift concerts when people were able to take like their elementary or middle school girls, like
Yeah.
how sweet and cute that is. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, we
I'm
had
excited
baby
for that.
girls. That wasn't going to be something that we were doing. But again, this is something that I think changes as our kids are in different stages. And if it's something that you prioritize, then figuring out how to make space for that is really important. But I have to tell you, I don't love going to playgrounds. That's like not my thing. I don't like indoor playgrounds, outdoor playgrounds. So I'm looking forward to when we're out of that stage.
Yeah, I feel that. One thing I'm seeing in the chat, and I know we're going to get into kind of like tips and tricks for like, handling the mental load and mom guilt, but this idea that like with the mental load, it's hard to not only get in the right space to ask for help, but it's also annoying to have to ask for help. Do you have any like tips around that, like in terms of, whether it's communicating with your partner or your parenting village or
Family.
whatever it is, like how to kind of share that load in a way that doesn't also feel taxing to you in the share?
This is the best question and the one that I
This
still
is the
don't
crux,
totally
right?
have
Yeah.
the answer to. But I think the first step is like, let's talk about what this actually is. Because many of our partners don't know, many of our family members don't know. So explain how, in the way that I did, what mental load is, this
Yeah,
invisible work that happens that piles up and it doesn't have a beginning or an end, and so it's really challenging. And so talking about what it is, and then in some ways being able to communicate and say, and I know this is hard and we wish that our partners could just read our minds, but that's just not going to be the case. And so saying, I need you to take care of X, Y, and Z. Let's put a list together and figure out what are our tasks that we do every week. This is a concept that's been really popularized by the book Fair Play.
yes.
So certainly, like, I think those conversations are important and actually contextualizing it. Hey, honey, have you heard of this thing called the mental load? It's
Hmm.
this invisible labor. Like, this is really hard. Let's talk about how we can figure out how to shift things. And this can be hard for mothers, especially who are maybe perfectionists, who think that they do things better. But I
Yeah.
think there also has to be some letting go. Like, if
Hmm.
my husband is going to dress my kids in the morning, like I'm just going to be okay with whatever clothes he chooses and
Totally.
kind of surrender to that. Surrender to
Yeah,
the fact that they may be wearing sweatpants every day to school and that's okay. And maybe their hair isn't exactly how I want to, but I think it also necessitates some giving up control. Some like maybe it's not going to be perfect, but I don't want to micromanage and it's just going to get done. And so I think this is really important. And I tend to find that yeah, listen, I love all the comments that are coming up. Some women are like,
yeah,
I like it this way.
yeah.
But you just it is some surrendering and letting go. And again, your house may not be perfect when you have little kids,
Right.
and it might not be everything you want, and that's okay. You have to prioritize what's most important. Your sanity, some time for yourself is going to be more important than, I don't know, what outfits your kids are wearing.
Totally. Yeah, and I would imagine too, I mean, I know I do this as someone who does like to be in control and does have to practice like not micromanaging my partner. Coming up with my priorities of things I really do care about, like if I really do care about the solids that my 9-month-old
Yes.
having, like but I don't care as much about what my son wears to school.
Yeah.
Having that conversation as well and being really clear about the things that like you really do want to have control
Yes.
over and vice versa. Are there any things that are really important to your partner where like they want to have control and you
Yes.
can have that trade-off?
And I think that's right. And even for you to reflect on it, whether you want to write it down on a list of like, here are the things that are super important to me, and here are the tasks that I want to continue to do. I know that I brush my kids' teeth better And so that's what I want to stick to, or that I buy the right diapers and my husband's going to like mess it up. So I'm going to continue doing those tasks. And if you can figure that out for yourself first before having the conversation, I think it'll also be like a really nice starting place of like, here are the things that I can give up that I can get help with. Is just a fantastic way to start. But like, I don't think that we do enough of that reflecting as we transition into motherhood of like, oh, I have all of these things that are now adding up. What can I give up? What can I just not care about as much?
Yeah,
I think is super, super important.
totally. Yep, totally agree. Okay, what other type of like maybe just logistical tips might you have for managing the mental load, especially with one's partner?
I think scheduling is something that often falls on mothers, like every single appointment, every single after school class, all of those things. So I love shared calendars or shared kind of tasks somehow. There's really great ones that are either technology enabled or some really cool ones that are like big boards, a grease board, whatever it has to be for everyone to have eyes on it, especially when you have older children, so they can take care of some of their stuff. Like
Right.
you have an 8-year-old who has soccer today, well, they can get their cleats and their soccer balls and all of this stuff. Or I just saw someone, we share calendars on our phone, but I think the visual of like everyone seeing it is a really cool thing. So everyone can start to take responsibility for things. Also, having kids kind of start to take responsibility for their things, even at a young age, is a really exciting thing, not just for a mother to kind of offload some of the mental load, but it's also really good for children to kind of get that idea of like, oh, I'm responsible for these things and here's what I'm going to do. They're not always going to get it right. But I think even toddlers can start to be responsible for like, oh, where's my backpack when I go out the door, right? And
Right.
you're not like doing it all for them. So I really like the idea of shared calendars so everyone can take responsibility. So it's not just you forgetting that they have a doctor's appointment. It should be a family kind of based thing. And I know it's hard, but I've had, where I have to be directive and say, hey, I need you to call and make an appointment with the doctor. I can't go today. Can you please go? And I know it's hard initially because it's more work to have to tell someone what to do, but I just think that's where we have to go, and that's a starting point. It doesn't necessarily have to continue that way.
Cool. Okay. What about like, so we talk a lot about too, kind of shifting a little bit away from just the mental load, but we talk a lot about this like parenting village. Like I feel like when you have a baby, one of the first things like, other people tell you is, it takes a village, like you need a village. Village, which is
Yes.
great and like couldn't agree more. But I think we have a lot of first time parents here. We have a lot of seasoned parents who are also still building up their village. What are some tips that you have to help one build up their village and their support system to help them manage things like mom guilt and the
Yes.
mental load?
Well, I mean, let's even talk about what the village means and
Yeah.
like start there. So, and I think a lot of where mom guilt comes from is that we have this concept, particularly in the United States, of the nuclear family. That
Hmm.
somehow mom is like this superhero that does it all, mom and dad. And again, this is for heteronormative relationships. Obviously, we know that relationships come in a lot, but it's like that this nuclear family that these parents can do it all and raise all of their children. But how we've raised children in other countries more traditionally is with extended family,
Yeah.
where our aunts, our mothers, our sisters, our cousins are all part of that community. There are some pockets of communities here, especially some religious communities that do that, where like, oh, everyone's going to Susie's house, and all the kids go over there on Thursdays, and people take care of each other's children. But we have moved away from our families of origin potentially, and it makes it really hard to have that support. So you have people who are living, let's say, in New York City, their parents live in Ohio. There's
Right.
no one around, and so we have to figure out our own village. But I
Hmm.
think the concept is, and I think what's really important is that you were not meant to do this alone. I know
Yeah.
it's almost like a badge of honor, like I can take care of my three kids on my own, but like that's just not realistic. Even an
Well,
only
and like
child is
you
really hard.
can, but you don't have to, right?
You
Like you
don't have to,
can,
and you can, but you need breaks. You need
right?
time for yourself. We're like even in the postpartum in most other cultures, I'm Latin American. There's like a 40 days of rest where I'm supposed to just be in bed and feed my baby, and everyone else is supposed to take care of me, bathe my
Yeah, come to
baby.
me.
But right, but when I was in the hospital, I had C-sections. It was like, here, take care of your baby, and don't you dare fall asleep. Which
It's
was just,
great.
it's just absurd. And
Yeah.
so I think what's important is to realize that you are not meant to do this alone. If you can, that's great. But sometimes that means you won't get breathing room or time. And so if you have moved away from your family of origin, it's can you find other parents and form this community? When they're
Yeah.
a little bit older, can they go to each other's houses so you get a break? Can you do any of the shared caretaking? And for some, it may mean, do I have to pay for caretakers to help me because it's just too much, even if it's for half a day, so you can get a little bit of a break and do something that like fills your cup, see some friends, get your hair done, whatever means something to you or whatever cheers you up or gives you or fills your cup, I think is really important.
Yeah. I completely agree. And it's funny, I was just in one of my mom group like threads the other day. I texted because I'm sure like many of you, I'm in a cold climate. There's been snow days all week, plus MLK was off. And, just trying to juggle like snow closures, kids at home, work, all these
Yes.
things. And I texted my friends and I was like, God, I just wish we all
What we
lived on
do.
the same street. Like sometimes
Yes.
that picturesque like 1950s 1960s vision of like sending your kids out into the street and
Yeah.
caring for one another is so dreamy. And I think even just speaking for myself, I need to make a larger effort to just offer to watch a friend's kid so they can go on a date night,
Yeah.
and I'm sure they'd love to
Yeah.
reciprocate, that
Yes.
kind of thing. I think also doesn't only serve me when I want to go out, but also feels really good when I can like get out of my house and, help my friend out and watch their kid for a little bit.
I think that's what it's about. And it's about kind of starting that or extending yourself in that way. I also saw some great things of like going to the public library, like
Yeah.
finding friends in this way, I think is really important. And in some ways, talking about this, like, oh, gee, let's figure out how to carpool. Let's figure out how to make our lives a little bit easier. Like in my community, I was thinking like I had a neighbor and I took this for granted. We didn't like we could have carpooled so we both didn't have to drive to the same place and like I could have traded off with her. It's just like I think I think we need to be more transparent with one another that we all have these shared needs and how can we help one another. And I know it can happen. I've seen it in LA where people after the fires just like I mean I got close from so many friends and here what do you need? Like we can do that in times that aren't just of crisis. Like that's
Right.
something like there is a mental health crisis for parents. Our Surgeon General said it is more stressful to have kids in America because of like outrageous, caregiving costs, difficult to find formula sometimes in this country. And so, how can we help one another? And I personally know that, friends gave me like 6 cans of formula that I needed. Like, and people are there. And again, it doesn't have to be just times of crisis.
Totally. Yep. And I think too, yeah, it doesn't need to be in times of crisis, and truly like mom friends are the best friends. And the most important, like some of the most
I
important people
know.
in my
They're
life
not just
are
moms, they're just friends, right?
our
They're just
friends
friends, really.
who
Yeah.
but who are also who are do also come from this place of wanting to be part of your village and vice versa. And maybe you're right, like maybe they're not moms, but are like love to be a mom to my kids too. I guess that's how I would
Yes.
define a mom
And
friend, is
and
like,
I yes, yes, but I also think that there's something here of like, can we even share the mental load with them? Can one
Right.
of your mom friends be in charge of finding the soccer class and you find the art
Yeah.
class, or you find the thing to do
Yes.
on
And
the
then share
weekend?
that
Like,
info. Yeah. Okay.
or enroll all the kids, like I think there's ways that we can leverage our community in this way that we just aren't. We're all living like these very isolated
Right.
lives, and it doesn't have
Yeah.
to be that
Because
way.
that's what we're used to, but we really don't need to do that. Okay, great. Let's get to some Q&A. Sarah, thank you
Sure.
so much. I know I am finding this so helpful, really brightening my day.
Me too.
Okay. Another Sarah is asking or saying, I struggle with managing the mental load, but then also longing for another baby. Part of me feels crazy for this when some days I feel like I can't survive. I feel like none of this is ever talked about a lot.
Oh, I mean, certainly in the mental health world, it is. I think, we didn't mention this, but Mavida Health, which is the organization that I created, provides therapy, individual group therapy, couples therapy, as well as medication management for this transition to motherhood. And I can't tell you how many times I hear this of
Mhm.
I value a larger family, but I am so overwhelmed by small tasks that I can't even come to that conclusion. And what I love about the treatment types that we have is that it's really based, and we try to figure out what are your value systems. And it is a really difficult decision. And I think it's thinking of the sort of how do we leverage community supports? How do we leverage other supports? Because if this is something you value over the long term, I don't want something and the hiccups and the mental load that for like a year or two to get in the way of that, right? Or
Mhm.
the fear to get in the way of that. But these are really hard decisions, and it's tough, but until you recruit more support, I think it's hard to make that decision, but I think that there are more ways that we can get creative so you don't have all the mental load on you that's stopping you from really choosing something that's in line with your values.
Great. Okay. This is from, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing this, but Jing. I think I have spent a lot of time in life doing what I thought I was supposed to do, school, work, etc. Now, as a parent, I have realized that there was never really a manual for how to live a good life, even though I may have thought that there was. Some suggestions for how to define our parenting goals, questions to ask myself, talk to my partner about, etc., would be really helpful. What is our vision for success? So I think she's getting at like, what would be some suggestions from you on
Yes.
how to like reflect on her own parenting goals and vision
Well,
for success in her family?
I love this question because I struggled with a very similar question, or where it was easier. It's like I knew I was really into academics and excelling academically, so I knew I have to get the right grades. And then once I get the right grades, I'm going to get into the right college. And then I wanted to be a doctor, so then I go to medical school, and everything felt like there is a very clear road of what I'm supposed to do, what our culture defines as success. And once you are off that ride and you are now kind of wandering around, like, what do I actually want? It's very challenging. And I think with children, you start to encounter that. Like, do I
Yeah.
even want more than one child? Do I even want children? I think is a big question that maybe people don't ask themselves because they're kind of on autopilot, is what I talk about. And I felt
Mhm.
like I was on autopilot for much of my kind of life and coming up. And so then it's a really about being like, it doesn't matter what other people have. It doesn't matter if people define being successful as living in New York or in some other big city. You have to start to reflect on what's most important to my life, right? Is that my family? Okay, what does that look like? Do I love being outdoors? Do I love small towns? Do I love large cities? Do I love, right? All of those things, starting to take an inventory of that. And it may look very different from what you thought you wanted when you were 20. And I
Right.
think it's really important to start to come to terms with your ideas of what your life looked like, and your fantasies of that may be very different now that you have kids, that you have a partner, and then being really vocal about it. But I think more and more people are leaving big cities because they're like, I don't want to be in this rat race and unaffordable housing. I just want a more peaceful life and to be able to afford housing and childcare and all of this stuff. And I think it's really important to ask the questions, have the conversations. Sometimes therapy can be very useful for that, or couples therapy can be very useful. And I think those are great places to start if you're having a hard time kind of making that inventory yourself. But be prepared that your values and what you imagine may be very different from what you used to. It also may be very different from what your parents envisioned for you or the ideas that others had for you.
Yeah, that's great advice. And also having the confidence in that, like what you want is what's right for you. And it doesn't matter what, your parents wanted or anyone else wanted for you. It's really what
Exactly.
you want.
Oh,
Uh,
also, I saw a comment from Samantha just about her severe PPD and all of this yeah, and this is motherhood. Oh my God, this is why I am a reproductive psychiatrist. This is why I created Mavida Health. I'm so tired of like the medical system gaslighting women and saying, "Oh, this is because you have this. This is because you're a mother. This is normal. You should, you're having all this anxiety. Like, don't worry about it. Things will change." That's not the case. When you are having these severe symptoms, there is help. There are people that are specialized in this space, and there are sources to get this type of care. And I hope that you get good care because it's out there. And I'm so sorry that you had that experience. But women experience this in all times of our life. And it's important for us to do more research and get more information because we deserve better.
1,000%. And I know you threw it in the chat, Sarah, but Mavida Health, it is spelled
Yes.
Mavidahealth. And that's a amazing resource for people to start. Okay, we have time for a couple more questions. Um, so I think this is going back to the conversation around the mental load. This person saying, like, how do you get to the next level essentially with your partner? So your spouse understands the mental load, um, and and that you're not trying to be a micromanager, but is still not changing.
It's still not okay. So this is where I think it's not a conversation that you have once and then you forget it. I kind of think this is something that should be on the schedule every single week of like,
Mhm.
let's take a 30 minute to decide what's happening this week, how we divide tasks. And it's a work in progress. It's something that maybe needs to be reinforced. And frankly, if it seems to be the cause of a lot of conflict, if your partner's just not getting it, sometimes escalating a little bit to therapy. Couples therapy is not just when you want to get a divorce or split up.
A
Couples
thousand
therapy is
percent.
so, right. Couples
I
therapy is
love
so you
couples
can work
therapy.
better with your, yes, great.
Yeah.
Like couples therapy is so you can, you have a partnership with this person in addition to a romantic relationship. These are complex relationships to have. And sometimes having a third party that is objective can really help with this communication. But I think this is not a conversation you have once. I would put it on your calendar and schedule it every single week of like, let's review what our loads are for this week. So we can figure out what to do next. And you can just say, I'm burned out. And if this doesn't change, then maybe we need to escalate and have someone else help us with this because I'm having a hard time communicating my needs or I'm not feeling like my needs are getting heard or met.
Yes, 1,000%. Okay, let's try to get to a few more questions before we have to wrap up. Okay, this is from Thelma. And Thelma,
So,
thank you so much for sharing this with us. My husband and I lost our baby girl 2 years ago after she was in the NICU for 48 days. We are now expecting a baby girl in March. I'm curious if you've worked with parents who've experienced loss in regards to how to honor your new child while also constantly remembering your other child. I feel a lot of guilt thinking that when I deliver, I won't be 100% thinking of our new baby, but will be remembering our sweet girl that we lost.
Thelma, thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing your loss. So I've personally worked with many people who have lost infants as well. At Mavida Health, we do this as well. And, I think it'll be on your mind, and that's okay because you've had another daughter. And ways to honor that are, if you've named your other child, sometimes people like wearing necklaces with that name. That's very, again, these are very like some tools. Um, Celebrating and ceremony, I don't think we do enough of, and ritual can sometimes be so helpful and so healing, whether that's her birthday. I think that will be really important as well. And listen, people that have more than one child, they think of their other children as they're welcoming a new child. And so I had a very similar experience. I lost a pregnancy at 16 weeks, so much earlier. And then I had another baby girl. So both were girls as well. And it was really hard, but I still think I named my other child, even though she wasn't born. And I think of her when I see my 9-month-old baby, and that's okay because I also carried this other pregnancy. She's part of me. She literally, those cells that of any baby that you've carried are in your body, in your heart, in different places. And so I just think it's really important to give yourself that space to continue to grieve as you're experiencing this great joy of welcoming a new baby. But I think it's okay that they're both going to be in your mind.
Yeah, I think Thelma, just sending you so much love, and we're so excited for you come this March. It's, loss and grief is probably another topic that we should do, Sarah. I know that
Yes.
so many of us, thank you
Well,
for
even
sharing.
becoming a mother is loss
Yeah,
and grief. You're grieving
totally.
your life that you used to have and welcoming this new life that's forever
Absolutely.
changed you.
Totally, totally. But yeah, Sarah, thank you for sharing your experience of loss. I've had my own experiences with loss. Like you said, becoming a mother is certain loss of self. So I think that would be another topic that would really
Yes.
resonate with all of us. Okay, let's get to like two more questions and then we will wrap up and probably do our giveaway. All right, and so many great questions here. I'm so sorry that I won't be able to get to all of them, but okay, here's one from Claire. I'm a full-time mom with a 3-month-old. Do you have any tips to better connect with my partner? Communication tips or low-cost ideas for dates that don't require a babysitter? We don't have babysitters lined up yet or a family close by.
Yeah, I think even when your kids go to bed, it's like an opportunity to kind of have the house to yourself, and figure out ways you want to do some cooking, or if you're too tired, order something simple like a pizza that isn't very expensive, and kind of try to have those times to yourself, or pick out something nice to watch together that you want to. But I think it's really hard to find the time, especially when there aren't other caregivers to really invest. But again, I think just starting to talk about, this is what's on my mind. Here's what I'm struggling with. Like, what are you struggling with? Often we don't ask one another what's happening. And again, I'm making generalizations, but sometimes men, especially heterosexual men, tend to repress things, not talk about things. And so I think curiosity and leading with curiosity is a really nice way to start communicating and connecting. Hey, how are you doing? What's coming up for you? Like, all these tantrums, like, is that impacting you? Like, for us in my relationship, this time with like displacement and so much stress has been really hard. But at the end of the day, I try to be like, okay, I have a lot to do. And sometimes I'm angry that my partner isn't maybe taking some load, but I ask him, like, how are you doing? It's really hard to lose our community and everything we wanted for our children. Like, what's happening? But it is hard when you're trying to survive and not thriving, as we say.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I will say is I think she mentioned she has a 3-month-old. So one nice
Yes.
thing about a 3-month-old is they do tend to sleep a lot, even if they're not sleeping through the night. Maybe they're going to sleep at 6:30 or 7. And I saw someone put this in the chat too, like, have a date night on the couch, binge a
Yes.
new show,
Yes.
like
Yes. Yes.
have some cuddle time and just have some like time with your partner, maybe not talking too and just zoning
Yeah.
out, being close. So I think so many different things you can do together with that, like maybe quote unquote downtime while baby's sleeping too.
Yeah, love it.
Okay, let's do this last one. It's not quite a question, but I think a lot of people will relate to this. Um, this person shares, I find it hard to build a village because I often don't put myself out there to try to make quote unquote mom friends or just let's call it new friends. I always have
Yeah.
the assumption that everyone already has their people and I don't want to be an imposition.
I know. I think I've struggled with this a lot, but I do think as you're in this different phase of life, it unlocks like a new form of connection. But I do think what you have to figure out, and maybe again, sometimes I'm a big therapy proponent, as you may already know. Sometimes it's figuring out what's the barrier I have with being vulnerable. What's hard about me saying, hey Ari, like want to hang out this weekend or want to go on our kids are similar ages, like let's go on a play date. Because what's the worst thing that can happen? Sure, maybe Ari has all the friends that she needs and she says, actually, I'm good right now. And so it's figuring out, am I just really sensitive to rejection? Is that really hard? But I do think that there is like an openness and an opening during this time in people's lives where it is a really nice opportunity. I actually think it exists at all times. And it's rare that I find that there's the people that are like, oh, I'm good. I don't need any friends. Like I'm up, right. I think people are always interested in new connections, especially if those new connections, like we talked about, can we leverage the community more? Be like, hey, can I watch your kids or can our kids have a play date and you don't even have to come. You can go get your nails done or something. Right. Is that
Right.
kind of a way to start that connection or just being like, all right, I'm really struggling with my toddler. I'm having so many tantrums. I think being real in that way can be such a connection. I think it's hard when I'm like, yeah, I'm the perfect mom. Like my kids are so well behaved. Like, how about yours? Like that's not
Right.
going to
Like,
be something
no.
we connect about.
Totally. Yeah, I completely agree. At least in my own experience making friends as an adult, I've actually found that first of all, I think making new friends as an adult can be really hard.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I have actually found that making friends as an adult with children is kind of is easier, at least for me, because you are both at the playground at 8:30 a.m. or something on a Saturday, and you can be like, how old is your little one? Mine is this. It's kind of
Yes.
like an easy
It's like there's an
intro.
opening. Yes, there's a
Yes.
good opening. But actually, what I also find is that we're all in this transitional state as mothers.
Yeah.
And we didn't talk about matrescence, but it's much
Yes.
like adolescence, where like we have all these changes in our lives and our hormones changed and our bodies changed and like our whole life changed. And in some ways, it's a little bit like adolescence, where it's like, I'm going through all these weird changes. Like, how are you? What's going on with
Right.
you? It's real. There's like some easy, low hanging fruit topics that are like, where does your child go to preschool? Like,
Right.
tell me about that. And I do think it makes it easier to
There's
connect.
common ground. There's some like basis common ground. I always kind of liken it to like freshman year of college. Like when you're a freshman in college,
Yes.
you are ready, like
Yeah.
everyone's looking to make new friends. And
You're
that's kind of
open. There's a vulnerability. Like we're both kind of new at this.
right.
Tell me more. Do you have tips and tricks? So I do think it takes some level of vulnerability.
Totally. You have to
That
put
can
yourself
sometimes
out
be
there,
hard.
but chances are the person on the receiving end is going to be so happy that you did.
And if they're not, guess what? Other people have kids and like that's
Totally.
on them.
Totally. Cool. Okay, Sarah, thank you so much. Well, I am pulling up the giveaway winner. And when I call the giveaway winner, if you could just hit the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. But while I'm doing that, Sarah, can you just remind everyone where they can find you, where they can find Mavida, maybe how they can sign up, if you want to just maybe
Absolutely.
quickly talk through that while I pick a
That's
giveaway
great.
winner.
So I'm on Instagram at Sarah Oreck MD. If you want to follow, I post a lot about my own personal experiences, but also kind of what it is to navigate this matrescence thing and all things mental health. You can also find us at Mavida Health on Instagram, where we have some great content around, again, the mental health aspects of this time in your life. If you're interested in clinical care, we are live in California, New York, and New Jersey, and we're actually covered and in network with Aetna, Cigna, and many Blue Cross Blue Shield programs. So again, that's California, New York, and New Jersey, and that's www.mavidahealth.com. And if you aren't in those three states, but still are curious about some of our offerings, we offer all of our evidence-based content as well as our community, where we have people who are struggling with mental health issues during the path to parenthood, all are on our Mavida app, and that's available nationwide. And the winner will get a free year subscription.
Amazing. Okay. And the winner today is Jessica Jennings. If you could raise your hand that you're still here, we'll give her a minute to raise her hand. Jessica Jennings. Okay, perfect. And there she is. Jessica, I will reach out to you to coordinate everything on Lalo's end, and I'll connect with Sarah's team to make sure they reach out to you about the Mavida Health um, membership.
Also, Lalo stuff is so good. I
Thank you.
just want to say that as a
Thank
mother,
you
I'm
so
like,
much.
as a mother who cares also about aesthetics, I'm like, this looks nice in my home. I'm very happy with that.
Yes. I mean, I'll give a Lalo plug all day, every day, but you can find us at Lalo on Instagram, meetlalo.com, of course. We have a lot of really exciting launches coming up this year, both in terms of product and in terms of, some other fun things. Big launch coming in March, and make sure to follow us on
Ooh.
Instagram and subscribe to our emails, as I'm sure you are if you have attended this webinar, for all the details. And Sarah, we'd love to do another one of these soon. So
Yes, yes.
everyone,
This was
take
so
care.
great. Thank you all for participating for this like incredible chat.
I have
It's
to
so
say,
nice
this
to
has
know that
been
we're
one of
all
the best.
together.
This has been one of the best chats. Again, like, moms rule the world. So thank you for everyone's participation and just the conversation. It was so great. And Sarah, thank you again to you. And
Oh
sending
my
you
God,
love.
Esme's son is named Lalo. Yes,
Oh
love
my
that.
gosh, I love that.
Also, Esme is a great name. All right. Thank
Very
you all
cool.
so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, take care, everyone.